landlord-tenancy agreement in Ghana in the 21st century. You all agree with me here that the presentation given by some of my colleague presenters here, their aim is to build houses for commercial purposes. And when you listen to them carefully, they're talking about rent and rent and rent. But it seems to me they are charging anyhow, and you can inject tenants anyhow, and they are charging even in dollars. So, moderator, as the world population continues to grow as a projected exponential rate, the global economy becomes very vulnerable, as it is no doubt faced with an unprecedented stress and unsustainable demand for accommodation. Indeed, it is estimated that the global population over 6 billion as of today will reach about 9 billion by 2040, according to the US population and social growth. Should this happen without a corresponding increase in the residential and commercial accommodation as it is in Ghana, ladies and gentlemen, having faced with this reality, governments in the world over established institutions to manage such problems. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rent Control Department was established under the Ministry of Water Resources, Waste and Housing in 1963 by an Act of Parliament, Act 222. The department works closely with landlords, tenants, and interested parties to promote optimal peaceful coexistence through education, reconciliation, and advice on rent matters in compliance with the Rent Act 1963, Act 222. To enhance social cohesion and promote economic development in the country. But from what I have heard from some of my co-panel members, I have never seen them come to rent control to tell us all these things, or to tell us that they have tenants, or no tenant has ever come to me to complain to me that their landlords are charging them so much. Because out of ignorance, I will take it as the Department operates as a tribunal with quasi-judicial powers mandated by the Rent Act 1963 Act 222 and the Rent Regulation 1964 LI 369 to regulate arbitration, rent-related issues that arise from the relation between landlords and tenants as well as other interested parties. The functions of the Rent Control Department include the following: investigation and arbitration of rent cases upon complaints lodged by either landlords or tenants against each other in accordance with the Rent Act 1963, and making determination thereof for onward referral to the rent magistrate whenever necessary. The rent magistrate is any judge who sits on rent cases. Is referred to as a rent magistrate. Complaints usually brought by tenants against landlords to our office is one, extension of time. When their tenancy expires, the landlord insists they vacate that very day that their tenancy expires. And they come to us to plead with their landlords to give them time to extension of time, give them some time to organize and go. But that is not the case. It's out of ignorance. If your tenancy expires, the landlord has no right just to tell you that because your 2-year tenancy has expired, he's evicting you on that grounds. You then become what we call a statutory tenant, and you have to renegotiate with your landlord on whatever terms that both of you agree and disagree. But in Ghana here, what we say is your 2 years has expired, I want the place. The moment you get out, he's giving it to another person on a higher rate. Other complaints that come from landlords against from tenant against landlords, inducing tenant to quit. Under the Act, Section 27 of the Rent Act, any action on the part of the landlord that will make the stay of the continuous stay of the tenant uncomfortable is an inducement. For instance, you find some landlords, they take you 2 years advance, and when they finish exhausting that money within 2 months, and they have 22 months to grapple with, they start to apply all sorts of tricks just to make you uncomfortable by locking the toilet, kitchen. depriving you of all sort of amenities. They even tell you that you don't greet them. These are all complaints that we receive from the landlords. And I don't see why, if you don't greet your landlord, that constitutes a crime for the landlord to eject you. And I don't see why, if you don't sweep, it's the duty of the rent officer to evict you. That is not the duty of the rent officer. If your tenant does not sweep, you go and report him to the nearest health inspector. We call them sama. And they will come, and then they have the competence to determine, to see whether the place is well kept or not. The rent officer, he hasn't got that competence to determine whether your tenant sweeps well or doesn't sweep well. So such complaints that they come to us, we try to see to it that we resolve them amicably, and then let the tenants go back to stay together in peace. Some of them to come, complaints that we refund of rent advance balance. The landlord, through estate agents, which I'll be coming to later, after having consumed the money, the estate agent comes back to tell the landlord that he has found somebody who is prepared to pay more. And you find that this landlord will gather people to come and then cast insinuations. Just they will intentionally make your stay very, 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 very uncomfortable. So you'll be fed up and say, okay, give me my advance balance. The law has a provision that you don't only ask for your advance balance. We have this situation, we are able to establish, to find out that the fault is coming from the landlord, who will not only tell you that you should pay the advance balance, but you pay it with current interest, not just the balance. Maybe you pay 2 years advance, you stay there for 6 months, you say, okay, I'm giving you back 1 year, 6 months advance. With that advance balance you are getting, you cannot rent a place for 1.5 years. So the Lord mandates us to use our own discretionary powers, depending on the circumstances surrounding the case that we receive, and charge current bank rate interest on the money for the tenant. That is, if the tenant insists he cannot stay in the place. Complaints brought by landlords against tenants to include recovery of possession. Some of them have genuine reasons for recovery of possession at the end of the tenancy. They want maybe to reoccupy themselves, give them to their elderly children or family members. But some of them naturally come because tenancy has expired. And he will come and give you all sort of flimsy excuses. I need a place for this and that. The moment you grant him the relief, he re-rents it out to another person. But the law makes a provision that you have to fill a form, and then you give the name of the person that you intend giving the room to. And you don't have the right to re-rent out that room after 2 years. But here in Ghana, what do we say? The tenants, they normally have a saying that the house belongs to the landlord, so the landlord can do whatever she or he wants to do. And it's the tenant who has to monitor and report to us that the room that the landlord claimed, I was living, the landlord claimed that he wanted it for a family member, he has re-rented it out at a higher rent to another person. We don't have the means to monitor such things. If it comes to our notice, it is our duty to bring back that landlord to book, prosecute him in court, and then jail him, and then take the room back to the original landlord tenant for him to stay in. But here we are short of staff, constrained, and then most landlords even don't follow it. Tenants don't follow it up. They don't have the time to follow up. I have a test case that a tenant really insisted on his right. It went as far as to the Supreme Court. The tenant even vacated the place, and the room was lying down there vacant, and it was ruled in his favor. So these are some of the things that landlords also bring. And then rent arrears too. Landlords also bring cases against their tenants for failing in paying their monthly rents. They also bring cases of such as breach of agreement. And I don't understand agreement. Most of you people, when you go, you are ignorant, excuse me to say. The landlord will give you pay the money, then he brings a typed paper after 3 days, after he has collected your advance. And in that tenancy agreement, he has written things that are of beneficiary to him. It's a one-way tenancy agreement. and you go, when you read it and you say it doesn't favor you, and you say you will not sign, the landlord has the audacity to come to the rent control to lodge a complaint against that tenant that the tenant is refusing to sign a tenancy agreement. What is an agreement? It is the do's and don'ts between two or more parties. So before you collect money from me as a prospective tenant, you must be able to give me your tenancy agreement, and I have to go through it. And if I'm satisfied, then before I pay monies to you. I don't pay monies to you, then you go and sit in the comfort of your room and then come out with rules and regulations that are beneficial to you alone. I'm yet to see a tenancy agreement that if the landlord misbehaves, what should the tenant do? It is always tenants should bring visitors. If you have visitors, you introduce them to the landlord. Tenants should not talk to this thing. How about the landlord? We have some landlords who are recalcitrant. They are a nuisance. So what happens to such landlords? I always ask. So if you have a landlord like that and you come close from work and you come home, you want your peace of mind, and you have this landlord open his wireless today loudly, and then so what action do you take against such a landlord? I ask these landlords, because you think you are 10 gods? No. So there must be, the agreement must come that if you, the landlord, misbehave, the tenant has a right to sue you at the rent control office. And the only thing that the law can do for you is maybe if you go to Ankafu or in Sawam prison, and then when you go there and come back, you will not do that again. But what do we see? When we want to pursue these cases, the parties don't help us to do so. We can't enforce it. But some of the people who insist come, and then we enforce it. Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, sensitization of the general public on their rights and obligations as either tenant or landlords in accordance with the Rent Act is another role performed by the department. For instance, it is an offense for a landlord to, 1, demand rent advance of more than 6 months. But what do we see in Ghana here? 2 years for residential, 5 to 10 years for commercial. But the law says no, you should not charge more than 6 months. It is an offense if you charge more than 6 months. You can go to jail 6 months for it. It is true. Under the Rent Act, Act 2, Section 25 sub 5 of the Rent Act states so. Any landlord who demands rent in excess for more than 6 months is an offense. And when you are found guilty under the Act, there are penalties that go with it. But what do we see in Ghana here? It's a full day for the landlords. 2, eject a tenant from the premises at the end of the tenancy without recourse to the rent control, the rent control department. Some landlords just take the law into their own hands and then try to forcefully evict tenants without recourse to the rent control law. 3, induce a tenant to quit by his actions contrary to the conditions of the tenancy, amongst others. I have explained that Section 27 of the Rent Act says that any act that you do that would make the stay of the tenant uncomfortable is an offense and an inducement for that matter. On the part of the tenant, it is against the rent law of Ghana for a tenant to default in rent payment for at least 2 months. It's a double-edged sword. The law cuts here and cuts there. As we listen to the man from Bro, they live on rents. He buy to let. You see, so if you have a tenant living in your house and at the end of the month he comes for his rent and you tell him stories that you're out of job, it has nothing to do with him. He's doing business. It is not a social welfare that you are saying, they say you're out of job, your wife is sick and all those. These are no excuses. The law will evict you on that. The law gives room for us to evict you on that. And if you also sublet the premises without the express consent of the landlord, you will also be evicted from the premises. Indulge in acts that constitute nuisance to adjoining occupiers, among others. For instance, maybe you come home drunk, you use the place for immoral things like doing prostitution, bringing suspicious characters to the house, and all those things. If we are able to establish that, we don't have the capacity to determine that. So if you are a landlord, you come and tell me that this person indulged, he smokes weed, she's a prostitute. We don't have. The law says convicted. If you are found convicted, that's conviction by a competent court of jurisdiction. If you have that conviction, then you come against that your tenant. You come there, we base on that and then act on it. But what we get is they come and tell you that he smokes weed. Report him to the police. She practiced prostitution. We don't have that competence, you see, to determine whether she's practicing prostitution or what. And then he's a drunkard. We don't have that competence, you see. So you must be able to come out, get your facts clear before you come to rent control such flimsy charges against your tenant for us to execute. Also, estate agents are not supposed to receive 20% of the advance from both tenant and landlords, as is the case these days, but 5% of the 6 months rent from the party who contracts same. But what do we see? An estate agent, landlord contracts an estate agent. After you, the tenant, have paid your 2-3 years advance, he takes 10% from you, take 10% from the land, 20% from the land, 10%. It's illegal. It's an offense under the Rent Act. It's supposed to be 5%. That's what the law says. 5%. If you take more than 5%, it is a criminal offense under the Rent Act. But lack of education, most of you people are being bamboozled by these estate agents. And the most funny thing is this, excuse me, most of you here are involved in estate management. You don't even know the way to the rent control office, but you are all supposed to work under the ambit of the rent laws of Ghana. You see, you are an institution. You build to sell, you rent out. You fall under the Rent Act. All of you fall under the Rent Act. You don't operate in a vacuum. But what do we see? You do whatever you want. I had a case. One of my officers had a case at one of the estates. I won't mention the name. They have their own security. When a summons was issued through the police to be served on this landlord, the security refused the police to enter and make service. That is how far Ghana we can go. You see, we don't respect our institutions. And this policeman was frustrated. He went back. I said, how can you, a private security man, supersede you, a police officer? How can you let that thing be? And they came back to me. I said, I cannot do anything, because if the police officer cannot have access to that place, what do you expect me, a rent officer, to do? You see, and they literally threw out this expatriate, and he called me and put it on speakerphone and listened to what was happening. I said, this is Ghana for us. And for all you know, they don't pay their rent tax, which is they are supposed to pay 8% to the Internal Revenue Service. They don't pay the property rates. They don't do it. They charge beyond the 6 months that government, the law says you should not charge beyond 6 months. They charge 2 years. And more so, we had our friend from telling us that they charge in dollars. You are in Ghana, and then you are charging in dollars. About a month ago, the deputy governor of Bank of Ghana came out to say it is criminal. It's an offense for anybody to charge any community in dollars. But the government is a victim by itself. The government themselves also charge in dollars. So if you are supposed to set the good space, you are charging in dollars, then the other tenants will also charge, landlords also charge in dollars. And it's a call too late, but it's better late than none from the governor of Bank of Ghana. So I'm sounding a caution to you, those estate managers who are here. Please, you should charge in cedis. Our denomination is cedis, is in cedis, not in dollars, so that the rents can be affordable for all of us. The rent control department also assess recoverable rents for of both vacant premises and occupied premises whenever applications are forwarded by landlords and tenants and other interested parties. It is pertinent to state that the amount to be paid as monthly rent for the use of any premises is very crucial for any tenancy and must be diligently arrived at. It is common knowledge in Ghana that recoverable rents are quoted by landlords without recourse to the rent laws, making this in the country very high. Making rents in the country very high. Mr. Chairman, Part 4 of the Rent Act mandates, 14 of the Rent Act mandates the rent officer to assess rents. So if you, the landlord, it feels that you have recourse to increase your rents, come to the rent control. I'm telling you, the estate developer, you just don't wake up and then increase rents anyhow. Come to the rent control and tell us you have done A, B, C, D to the structure that is of beneficiary to the sitting tenant. Then we come out and then assess rent. You don't just wake up on your own accord and then increase rent. It's illegal. According to the laws of Ghana, not me who is saying it, it's the laws of Ghana that is saying it. But are we practicing it? Again, it comes to ignorance on both sides. But I will say the tenants don't know, but the real estate agents, excuse me to say, they know, because they are educated people full of lawyers and all those. But because the thing is benefiting them, they capitalize on the ignorance of the vulnerable and then have their way through. You see, we have a lot of challenges in the rent control department, and we can do a lot for Ghana and the housing sector. The whole department, as I will tell you, is we have only one vehicle. The Minister of Water Resources, Works and Housing does not. They see rent control, they ask the question, what rents do you control? I think the name is misleading. It's a free market. They ask the question, what rents do you control? And it's true, we don't control rents, but we manage rents. So the name, we are having a difficulty with the name. We've proposed that it should be changed to Rent and Housing Management Department, so that people can have the better understanding of it. But when you use the word control, they say no, you don't. It's a free market economy. So that's what it is. And then we have our human capacity is very, very low too. We've had the opportunity, the past government, the Kufuor administration in 2005 contracted the Law Reform Commission to go around the whole country to see whether there is a need for the rent control to be abolished or to be maintained. And when they went around the whole country, the report and the figures they got from the populace, 57% said there is the need for the rent control to be maintained and resourced adequately to continue to provide the role they are playing in the housing sector. 30% did not even know that. 30% said they should scrap the rent control department because they don't see of its relevance. And then 13% did not even know that the law, there's anything called rent control or any law called rent law. And then the Rent Act, you all agree with me, Your Highness, is absolute since 1963. And we have been battling, and we've come out to review this act. The Law Reform Commission came out with amendments so that to meet with international standards. Since April 2010, this law has been revised to a Rent Bill 2010. And you know what is happening? The delay in passing into an act? My sector ministry is saying they don't have 5,000 Ghana to organize stakeholders to come and fine-tune it so that it can be passed into law. Since 2010, we've been battling. They say no money. Battling, no money. So I'm appealing to all of you here. I will need your input because I learned a lot from most of you people here, and it will better you people if you bring in your input or put it into the law. But when we pass the laws as it is, it may not benefit some of you. if we are able to gather some money, I'll invite all of you stakeholders to bring in your ideas, your suggestions, so that it will conform with international practice somewhere like in India and South Africa. If we get experts from all of you, we sit down and then come out before we finally present this thing to the ministry to send to Parliament to be passed into law. So I'm appealing to all of you to come to our aid to help us with logistics. Can you imagine this 21st century? We are still using the typewriters. And we are in rented houses. Our landlords are chasing us left and right. We are supposed to enforce the law, but we are the first breaking the law. So what moral right do we have if a landlord comes with his tenant that the tenant is, well, what moral right do you have to do? We ourselves are victims. So we are appealing to all of you to come to our aid. And I'll take this opportunity to thank all of you for giving us this opportunity to express our concerns. Thank you, Express.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dombo, for that.